The Tabletop Miniature Hobby Podcast is proud to be sponsored by Dr. Spork's 3D Terrain. From retro greenskin outposts to elven fortresses and obelisks, this is hands down the best nostalgic scenery you'll find out there, and all at stupidly reasonable prices. Check it out for yourself by heading over to bedroombattlefields.com/spork, that's SPORK, and turn your tabletop into a scene from White Dwarf circa 1994. Andy Chambers not included. Brought to you by bedroombattlefields.com, this is the Tabletop Miniature Hobby Podcast. On this episode of the Tabletop Miniature Hobby Podcast, Joe McCullough joins me for the fourth time, though it's actually the first time we've had a chat, since February 2024. Joe's been as busy as ever in that period, and his two latest offerings are Warriors of Athena, a solo and cooperative skirmish war game of heroism and adventure in the realms of Greek myth, and the whimsical Hairfoot Jousting, where you control lance-wielding halflings mounted on the backs of pigs, turkeys and sheep. We'll find out more about these two games later in the episode, but seeing as it's been a while, I thought I'd kick things off with a very general question. How's life?
I'm entering that phase of life where I'm becoming not quite the taxi driver for my kids, but, because my wife's usually got the car, but I'm running around after my kids quite a lot. They're driving a large portion of my life right now.
Yeah. What age are your kids?
So one turns 12 today, and the other one's 9.
I saw on your blog, the Renaissance Troll, you've been playing Hero Quest with your son. You were saying, is it 2 boys you've got, or a boy and a girl?
No, that's the older one's a girl, and my son's 9. Yeah.
Yeah. So is he enjoying Hero Quest then?
Oh, he loves it. He loves it a little too much. It's always, can we play Hero Quest? Can we play it? And it's like, I love playing this, but it takes a while to set it up, and then it's not a short game really. I mean, I guess it is in the grand scheme, but you got to have a good hour clear to really play it, and I don't often have a clear hour that I haven't thought of in advance. So,
yeah.
But
how long has he been playing Hero Quest?
I guess we've been playing about a year, off and on. Yeah. So I mean, he's always been interested in my miniatures, and Hero Quest is just such a great starter game for that, especially for kind of the style I play. And I'm using it as an excuse. I'm kind of replacing most of the minis in the box with Reaper minis, so it gives me an excuse to go, well, now I'll buy some orcs.
Yeah. Is he of an age now where he's got a real appreciation for like what you do for a living?
A little bit, I guess. They like to. They just think it's cool that I'm famous. I'm like, Dad, you're famous. I'm like, well, I suppose I'm known in a very small, community. But
how do you find that? In your and all the parental circles that you'll have been in throughout your kids' lives, nursery and school and stuff. How do you find that? When the inevitable conversation with like another dad, what do you do? How do you how have those conversations gone?
It always goes the same way, to be honest, because I usually start off with, oh, I'm a writer. And of course, then they're like, oh, well, what do you write? And I'm like, oh, I mainly write games. And they're like, video games? No. Board games? No. I'm like, I write miniature war games. And they're like, what is that? I'm like, I write rules for playing with little toy soldiers. And they kind of look at me blankly. And I'm like, have you ever seen Warhammer? Oh, yeah. I'm like, yeah, I'm their knockoff.
That's a good elevator pitch. And then secretly they're thinking, this man has no job.
Yeah, I know. It's like, he's just a kid. He just plays with toys at home.
When you're playing Hero Quest with your son, do you add on little homebrew bits and pieces?
Yeah.
Could you help yourself?
Absolutely. I mean, one of the beauties of the game is, this is kind of a deeper theory I'm thinking about and probably going to write about some, is like Hero Quest. So we've got the modern version, but the modern version is almost identical in rules to the original version, which is kind of funny because the rules themselves are kind of poorly written. Like, there's just there's all kinds of problems with Hero Quest, but actually there's a beauty to these problems because these problems come up as you play, and you as the player immediately think, "Oh, that ain't right. We got to come up with something better for that." So it kind of encourages you to make homebrew rules, and I think actually that's one of the greatest things a game can do. It not only gets my creativity flowing and his creativity flowing, but also it makes the game more yours and it makes you want to go back to it more. This is our hero quest, this is how we play it. And yeah, and the game's so simple in its core mechanics that you can just tack on stuff all over the place and it still remains a simple game. So yeah, we use our own homebrews. I found some online that I like that we use, and we chop and change. So sorry, it just started hammering it down rain here. If you're picking up a bit of background hum there.
I can't hear it, but we've had plenty of
Yeah, I
ourselves.
mean,
Plenty up here too. Yeah.
to all your listeners, we live in Britain. You just got to deal with
it. Yeah. What do you play regularly, like aside from obviously Hero Quest? What other games are kind of on your rotation?
So I've got a gaming group that meets on Sunday nights, and if everyone's kind of there, we actually role play. We play right now we're playing Deadlands, which is a kind of Weird West game I really like. But if anybody's not there, then we kind of go to other games. So like this weekend, we ended up playing Space Hulk because we only had 3 guys, including myself. And that's one of my go-tos. I tend to play a lot of older games. Modern game-wise, I'll generally play my own games. But I play Hero Quest, I play Space Hulk, I play Silent Death, which is a space fighter game from a long time ago, but I think has just absolutely brilliant mechanics. And then I've gotten to this point where I think in terms of miniature gaming, I think less about the games I want to play and more the miniatures I want to play with. So I've got a 4th edition Demon Hunter's Army for 40K. I don't play modern 40K. I'm perfectly happy to use it for the 4th edition of the game that it was originally intended for, and I have played that a little bit. But I'm also just like, well, I can use this to play Xenos Rampant, or I can use a squad of these figures and play a Stargrave scenario or something like that. So that's just, and I've got the same with, I've got a Dal Amroth army that's only about half official. If you're talking about the GW ones, I use the knights, but then I've got infantry for other places. So again, I'm perfectly happy to use that to play the Middle Earth strategy battle game, but I'll also play Oathmark with it. I'll play Dragon Rampant with it. I'll play a skirmish game where I pull out 10 of those figures and use it. And yeah, so I've just started thinking about that. I think, and that's partly because really I end up spending more of my hobby time alone painting miniatures. So I want to focus on, well, what's the most enjoyment I can get out of that? And that tends to be, well, I want to paint some Dal Amroth guys or whatever. And then I'll figure out what games to play with those. So.
I had noticed that, like, on your blog, like, you seem to be a pretty prolific painter still. And obviously, your day job of writing games doesn't seem to have extinguished your enthusiasm for sitting down and doing some painting.
No, I mean, we'll probably get into the deeper of that later. It does affect it sometimes, but I've been a miniature painter my entire life, really. So, or at least, going on 40 years or something. So it'd be a hard habit to break, in all honesty. And yeah, it's meditative in a way. And it's actually also really helpful to my job because as I'm sitting here handling a miniature, I tend to think about this miniature and I think about how I can use it to play. And that often translates into game mechanics, like, well, it'd be really cool to have a scenario that did this so I can use this guy. I'll jot that down and maybe use it later. Or this guy's holding a really cool, what's it? I should have a magic item, specifically for that. And then I can work that into a game. So to me, it's part of this kind of circular creativity, the games inform the figures inform the games, and around it goes.
If we look at like, you know, the past decade, I believe, did Frostgrave initially come out in 2015? Am I right with that?
Yeah, that sounds right. Is that right?
So
Or was it
like
2026? I can't remember. It's one of those two.
10 or 11 years.
Yeah,
Uh,
I guess it was last year. Yeah.
Thinking about that period, have your years kind of followed a consistent pattern, or latterly do you feel your work has changed in terms of like how busy you are versus what stage you're at with certain things, if that makes any sense at
Yeah.
all?
Yeah, it's changed massively. Like, I mean, first off, when I wrote Frostgrave, I was in full-time employment, okay, with Osprey, but doing completely separate things to writing games. So it was really something I did, you know, on weekends or at home after work. And then slowly I kind of withdrew from my paid employment. I first went down to 4 days and spent one day writing, and then I kind of went half time and spent half the time writing and half the time working. Uh, and then there was a confusing period where I was working half time, but as an employee who wrote games. So that's where you get Oathmark and Silver Bayonet, which are written as an employee for Osprey, as opposed to all the other ones, which are written freelance. Um, and so I went through a period of, hey, this is kind of fun and weird, and I don't really know what I'm doing when I wrote Frostgrave, to a period where I was kind of at a creative peak I doubt I'll ever hit again, where I was writing both Oathmark and Rangers of Shadow Deep at the same time. So I'd spend literally one day writing Oathmark because that was my day as an Osprey employee, and then I'd spend the next day writing Rangers of Shadow Deep and literally going back and forth and just kind of in this white hot passion of creativity. And that's kind of calmed down, and probably a good thing. I don't know that it was sustainable as a lifestyle, really, but and I guess I'm now hitting a point where I guess I've written all of the games I set out to write when I realized I was going to be a game designer. Um, so I kind of always knew after I wrote Frostgrave that I would write a Greek myth game like Warriors of Athena, and that I would write a game that was a bit more Dungeons and Dragonsy, like Rangers of Shadow Deep, and that at some point I would write Stargrave. I would write a space version of one of my games. Um, I've also written a few games I didn't expect to, like Hairfoot, Jousting, and Silver Bayonet. So I don't have this quite absolute need to write the next game that I had before, um, because I've done that. And this is both sad in a way to kind of lose that real intense drive. At the same time, it's kind of nice because I can take a more relaxed approach and kind of see where do I want to go next? What catches my fancy? And then, okay, I can go off and do that for a while. So yeah, that's kind of where I am at the moment. And it fits well with how life is, because as the kids have grown up and they're now kind of asking more of me, as a parent, I've got perhaps a little more time to devote to that because I'm not working quite as intensely as I was before.
Has having kids and gaming with your kids, has that influenced anything in your writing at all?
Um, I don't know. Um, I mean, I've got the funny story of when I did Rangers of Shadow Deep, and I was working with the designer, and he had all the artwork, and I said, we were talking about the cover, and I said, use anything except the guy holding the severed head, because I was like, I don't want to put a severed head guy on a cover with a game that you might want to play with kids. So of course he goes off and he makes a cover with the guy holding the severed head, and I was like, oh man, that's what I told you not to do, and it's perfect. Like this is, he did several versions of the cover. To be fair, he did like three others, and then said, okay, I know you told me not to, but I did this anyway, and I was like, yeah, all right, that's the clear winner. And of
Mhm.
course, now as my kids have gotten older, I realize, like, nothing draws the kid to the book more than the guy holding the severed head. Like that's clearly what they want to be a part of. I think it has made me a little more sensitive. Like especially Rangers of Shadow Deep would occasionally have children appear in it in the scenarios, and they're always like kids you need to rescue, or But then to make that an interesting part of the game, an interesting part of the narrative, there has to be a chance of the kid getting squashed, and that makes actually me slightly uncomfortable to write as a game designer, and I think it hasn't happened quite as much as it perhaps did in the past. That's a very minor thing, but no, beyond that, I mean, since I guess my son is just starting out on his journey, and we're getting there, it's not something I can talk to him about a lot. But as he grows older, it'll be interesting to see if that continues and what effect that might have.
Anything that, like, over the years you've been reading to him, maybe at bedtime, or any TV shows he's got into that's kind of sparked something in you where you thought, like, that's, not directly a cool idea for a game,
Right.
but just a bit of influence here or there?
I mean, I've tend to read him and show him all the things that influenced me to begin with. So, it's like, you're 3, you're old enough to watch Doctor Who now. Get in front of the TV,
Do you remember Dino Riders?
What's that?
Dino Riders.
Yeah,
because I've been watching that with my daughter. She's just about to turn 5, so
right.
I think there's only like 14 episodes, but very typical of that time in the 80s where it was like, these are cool toys. Yeah. Can we sort of loosely assemble a plot around this and just make them move and shoot and stuff?
Yeah, I do. I remember the toys. I don't really remember the cartoon, because I do remember thinking, even as a kid, I knew that this is stupid, and yet I want them. Dinosaurs with armor and missiles. Yeah, that makes no sense. Give them to me. So.
Yeah. What about imagine you could choose any IP ever to write a game around. What would be your dream IP?
Boy, that's tough. I mean, most of them have already had games, probably. So like the Lord of the Rings is probably my single greatest influence. But there's been a game, and actually it's pretty good. I would like to try to write a Doctor Who game. There's been a couple. I don't think any of them have quite nailed it yet, and I'd like to have a try at that. I mean, it's very difficult to take an IP that is about a central character and then kind of expand that to a war game. But in truth, I'm generally happy with the kind of generic, so something like Stargrave draws on all kinds of influence. It draws on Doctor Who and Star Trek and Star Wars, and I like that. I guess I've never been someone who did a lot of gaming in very specific worlds anyway, except ones of my own imagination. And I've always liked that freedom to not have a map and go wherever I wanted. I guess if I had to pick one, I'd kind of like to do a war game based on Stargate, or Stargate SG-1, if you know that show, because it perhaps makes a better role-playing game, but there's something beautiful about it's kind of military science fiction, but has that kind of Doctor Who ability to go anywhere, and I think that would actually make a pretty good war game, because you've got your squad and they're always going somewhere new, and you could potentially fight the old enemy that's always around, or you can fight new enemies, and also has an element of exploration, because I think most of my favorite games also do have an exploratory element to them. So I'd probably go with that one. Could probably get it pretty cheap these days too.
With your 2 recent games, Warriors of Athena and Hairfoot Jousting, I believe you were on some Tim Pop podcast called Paint All the Minis, which I'll link to, which I think you and Dan got into a wee bit about either game. But were these games, you've kind of alluded to it, like Was it Warriors of Athena? That was the sort of game that you've wanted to make for a while. And did Hairfoot Jousting, was that just a bolt from the blue one day? What's the story
Yeah, I
there?
mean that was the literal bolt from the blue. It started as a joke between me and some friends online. We were just on Discord or something, laughing about what it would look like for halflings to joust and what would they actually ride. And then like I went outside to hang up the laundry, and I hate hanging up laundry, so my brain's just like do anything else. So it created rules for Hairfoot Jousting, and the core rules of that game were done in 20 minutes. Obviously, the writing then took quite a bit longer, but but it was a very quick process from beginning to end. So yeah, that was just out of nowhere, and in some ways, that's the most fun creativity. Well, anyway. So whereas yeah, Warriors of Athena is a game that really I've known I would write since I wrote Frostgrave. In fact, what the first kind of reskin I ever did for Frostgrave was a few Warriors of Athena scenarios that appeared in a magazine. It was even called Warriors of Athena then, but it was completely based on Frostgrave rules. And I knew right then that like, oh, someday I want to do this as a full game. But I also knew like now is not the time. I'm not ready, and this isn't quite right. So it took another 9 years or whatever to actually get there. But
Have you always
yeah,
been interested in Greek mythology?
always like um yeah I it goes back to finding a game called Heroes of Olympus when I was like 9, which is an old, I think it's Task Force Games. I've got a copy, but it's a game that's nearly unplayable. It's a very odd combination of role playing game and hex based war game, which are two things that just do not go together well at all. But I love it because it comes from this kind of time when hobby gaming was still figuring itself out and still dividing into its kind of various genres. But it was my first encounter with the game is based around the journey of Jason and the Argonauts, and I came to realize that like this is history's first superhero team up. You've got Hercules, and that's probably the only one I knew at the time, but you've got all these other Greek heroes, and each one of them tends to have some kind of special ability or special power. And again, it's a game and a setting both about kind of fighting, but also exploration, because like these guys had no idea. They knew they were going off to get the golden fleece, but they just didn't know anything that existed between point A and point B. So everywhere they stop is like new lands and new peoples, and so that idea of kind of like this is our world, and yet at a time when it could have contained anything because we didn't know anything about it, and these guys don't know anything about it. And that was just a really cool idea to me. And there's a beautiful kind of simplicity to it that you kind of don't find in modern fantasy. Modern fantasy tends to be very kind of intricate and complex, and and in game form, it tends to mean guys are carrying all kinds of gear and potions and spells, and whereas the Greek heroes, it's kind of like, well, I've got a stick, like so.
Have you had a lot of feedback about either game yet since they've been out there in the wild?
Some. uh, Warriors of Athena is still kind of going through the process. It had a couple of hiccups in its kind of distribution. So half of it kind of arrived before the other half, and then it had to be reprinted. So it didn't kind of explode out in the way that some games do. It's kind of more trickled out. So it's been kind of a slower build. And in some ways that's good, because if too many copies get out, then everybody finds all the mistakes right at once. Whereas here, at least it'll be drawn out, and I don't have to suffer quite as much as people tell me what's wrong with it. But I've gotten a few though. I've made every game's going to have a few things. Luckily, none of them are catastrophic yet. But yeah, and I think Warriors of Athena, even more than any of my other games, is a game that pushes for the players to use their own creativity. I mean, it has everything you need to play it straight, take the quests out of the book, and just play them. But it gives a lot of advice for using a game master, or creating your own scenarios, even if you're not using a game master, and just generally creating that world as you play. Because like I said, it's completely unexplored and it could contain anything. So take advantage of that and create anything. So it has been nice to see online people already, creating their heroes and creating the monsters they want, and then thinking about how they can work that into their own campaigns and narratives. So Hairfoot Jousting is a very limited game in a lot of ways. It's not a game that, although it has a campaign system, it's not a game where you're going to play long campaigns. It's more a game you're going to just throw on the table when you need something quick and fun. And I think that it's been received that way. It was quite interesting when I went to Adepticon this year. I was on the stand with Badger Games. That was the game that was kind of flying off their shelves for some reason. And I think that's because it's a game that sells better in the flesh than it does kind of online, if you know what I mean. People actually, when they see the book and the artwork in it, and probably see that with the figures nearby, it makes them smile, and it makes them want to buy the game. Whereas you don't fully get that sense of humor and that just kind of whimsy online. Whereas with something like Warriors of Athena, people kind of know in advance, like, Greek myth is for me or Greek myth is not for me. And thus, I think people tended to know whether they were going to buy that game before it came out or not.
Hairfoot Jousting, it sounds like one of the games that'll attract the converter, like the miniature converter. Like, if you think about a game like Turnip 28 famously, like, I think that is a big converters game. Have you found that people are enjoying putting together conversions?
There's probably, I would say there's more actual, like, 3D printing going on than conversion from what I've seen, which may just be a statement about the way the whole industry is going. It's another funny one where it was a game I wrote with no expectations of there actually being miniatures for it. So I just assumed everybody would have to convert, and I converted my own. And then, of course, they did make some miniatures for it, and they're really fun and beautiful. So a lot of people are using those. But yeah, there's been a lot. And what I like is that people have really taken to the fact that, like, you don't need to worry too much about what the model looks like. It's just supposed to be a silly placeholder. And it doesn't matter whether your halfling is riding a frog or a pig or a weasel, just find the figures that amuse you, and then they'll fit right into the rules. So.
For just $5 a month on Patreon, you'll get at least 2 new bonus episodes every month. These are extra conversations recorded specifically for Patreon that you won't hear anywhere else. And you could listen to them today by going to bedroombattlefields.com/Patreon. That's bedroombattlefields.com/Patreon. And now back to the show. With your kind of reputation in this industry and all the stuff that you've created and achieved, like, when you speak about writing games, a lot of people listen. Has that ever tempted you to get into creating something around creating games, like writing something about writing games, if that makes sense?
So I guess the closest I've come is I wrote Perilous Dark, which is the kind of how to play solo scenarios with Frostgrave. And the book is very much a how to write solo scenarios for Frostgrave. And I got to put a lot of philosophy, my gaming philosophy, into that. So I did enjoy that. It is awkward in that if you're just interested in game design, this is actually a supplement for a game, not a book about game design. And I guess it's a topic I cover a bit on my Patreon. I'll write various articles about a specific aspect of game design. In general, I prefer to talk to people face to face about it. It tends to be what I talk about if I do a talk at a convention. or a couple of times I've gone into universities and talked to game design classes. But I don't. My area of game design is so specific and niche. I don't know how much of an audience there would fully be for it. Um, and I don't know that I'm the perfect person to write it either, because I do have a very strong and specific philosophy of gaming that isn't or doesn't completely overlap with where the kind of money is in gaming. So yeah, but I like writing and I like designing games, so it is going to happen from time to time. But
Yeah, I guess like you've got your writing time and you maybe have to weigh that up of would I rather be
yeah,
writing a game or writing about writing a game. So
exactly.
if you say you won like the Euro Millions or that and you were
You would
absolutely
never hear from me
filthy
again.
rich. Presumably your passion would remain. You're
Yeah.
obviously not going to be as busy as you were, but like what kind of projects might you take on to keep yourself entertained if you were
Yeah.
Scrooge McDuck in his pool of gold?
Swimming in my money vault. Yeah, I mean, obviously I've thought about it. It's the kind of fun fantasy that everybody has, isn't it? And no, I wouldn't. Well, I don't really know what the heck I would do. But I think I would continue to work because it only sometimes feels like work. So for the time it doesn't feel like work, it's just having fun. Um, I think it would speed the kind of direction I'm going now anyway, which is I'm just going to kind of write what I want when I write when I want to, and what comes of it comes of it. Um, I can't afford to completely do that right now, but I think the hard part would be so the writing would be the easy part because that's the part I enjoy the most. I enjoy the craft of putting words onto a page. The hard part would be all the other stuff that comes after it, the editing and the drawing maps to go along with it. And sometimes I enjoy these things, but not as much. And if I didn't have to do them, I don't know if I would. So maybe I would just start employing people to do that part and take care of it. But yeah, I would still do it. Again, I think it would speed the process I'm on, which is probably there would be. I think there's going to be less and less new games. Partly that's just because I only have so many ideas. Partly there's only so much time, and you can only support so many games. And so I'm just going to kind of produce the supplements because these are the games I want to play. When you were asking about what games do I play, I tend to play mine if it's miniature games because I wrote games that I wanted to play. And as I play them, that tends to stir my ideas of, ooh, it would be cool to add this to the game. So I think, yeah, I'd probably stop thinking as much about what's next and what game can I write next, and more about what do I really want to add to this now, because that's the direction my creativity and my campaign is going.
Mm-hmm. Could you tell me about a time the hobby genuinely helped you through something difficult?
Yeah. So I am incredibly fortunate to have gotten to the age that I am without any major tragedy occurring in my life, knock on wood. That said, I've never been the most mentally stable person in the world. I tend to run incredibly hot and cold, and kind of have had long periods of downness, uh, or periods of pretty massive anxiety. And I went through one of those kind of periods of anxiety, about four years ago, say. And there was nothing specific that triggered it that I can say. Sometimes I can say, sometimes I can't. This was what I can't. And at that time, I bought a copy of the original Marvel Crisis Protocol box set. I had no intention of playing this game, even though I think it's actually a very good game. It's just not a game of the style I tend to enjoy. But I I got that home, and the first thing I painted was was a bin. Was literally a garbage bin that is in the game as terrain, like one of the big ones outside of building. And I had so much fun painting that because I wrote my daughter's name and like graffiti on it, and I just gave it my all, even though it was a bin. And then over the next few months and maybe the entire year, I don't know, I painted every figure in that box one at a time. I'd assemble a figure, I'd prime it, I'd paint it, and I wouldn't touch anything else in the box until I finished that one. And it's one of the very few times in my gaming career that I've actually painted an entire starter box of anything. And funny that I did it for a game that I had never any intention of playing. Although then I realized that that's why it probably helped me, because it was a way for me to still do the hobby without it overlapping my job. Because I had no intention of playing it. I had no intention of writing a superhero game. I couldn't, it's a very strong IP that I couldn't really mess with anyway. And I realized it was actually more of a modeling project than it was a gaming project. But kind of, I think it helped me find that joy and that focus and that kind of meditation that for a while I'd been lacking because everything was linked to my work. Now, luckily, I've gone through that, and I'm in a good period right now, and actually working on stuff that is related to my work is fine and actually quite enjoyable and helpful. But I still now buy the occasional Marvel figures just to paint, and just when I kind of need a break from other things.
What would you tell your younger self just starting out in the hobby?
So this is where I should point out that while I write rules for a living, I'm absolutely terrible at following rules. I think that's probably one of the things that makes me a good game designer is I'm perfectly happy to change rules. And so I was thinking about this one, and my first thought was, actually, I don't know that I would tell myself anything because one, I don't think I would have listened at the time anyway. And also because I think I don't want to mess up that journey I went on. So I thought about that it might be really interesting to reverse the question and see what my younger self would tell me now, because I think, wisdom doesn't always come with age. Sometimes it fades with age or it's a different type of wisdom. And so I was thinking I think my younger self would tell me, or at least make sure there's some things I hadn't forgotten. And I was thinking the main one would be that each miniature is a treasure and each miniature you paint is a triumph. And because that's how it was when I was just starting out. And for one, you can't afford many miniatures, so each one you get is oh man, this is awesome. And I'm going to do my best to paint it. And you're just really jazzed and fired up about that. But as we get older and we have more money, at least in theory, we have more money available to spend on our hobbies, we actually lose some of that because in the excitement of we can now buy whatever it is we want, it all becomes a little less valuable to us. And so instead of buying, all right, I was able to go get one blister pack with the command for some spearmen. Now it's I'm going to buy the whole army. And you buy the whole army, and then the whole army doesn't quite have the same value as those 3 guys in the blister pack did. So I think that's what he would say to me. And it's something that I do need reminding because I get caught up in it too. Because it's just so everybody's different, but I've found repeatedly that I only enjoy the hobby if I'm focused on one miniature at a time. I may have another one that I'm working on while the paint dries on that one, but really I'm painting that mini right now, and that's how I enjoy it. And as soon as I start thinking in terms of I need a unit of 20 of these guys, my enjoyment starts to fade.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a really good reframing of that question, which again assumes that a young person's going to ever listen to an old person or an older person. And you're right as well. If I think back to the miniatures I had when I was 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, like they were few and far between it. You didn't get much stuff, but when you did get something, the blister pack would be opened in the back seat of the car on the way home or on the bus home. You knew every single little detail on a miniature, every pouch, like you knew it
Exactly.
off by heart. Whereas now you've got boxes of stuff where you're like, I don't really know much about this. So
And it's funny, isn't it? Because, like, in some ways, I think most of us are chasing after that feeling we had when we were
mhm.
13 or 14. But at the same time, we refuse to approach the hobby in that way.
Yeah, yeah. What's the most you've ever spent on a single hobby purchase, and how did you justify it?
So over the years, I've spent quite a sum on hobby stuff. That said, I've never been one to spend huge amounts of money at a go, partly because of what I was saying just about the style in which I do things. Buying an entire army for me is just a terrible idea. And I've probably bought 6 or 7 big Games Workshop box sets over the years, and I've never finished any of them. I just don't, and I've gotten to the point where I've realized that's just a bad purchase for me. Um, so I'm gonna I'm gonna kind of undermine myself with what I'm about to say, but so I tend not to spend huge amounts in one go. I tend to take lots of little bites. That said, a couple of years ago, and I like go back even farther. So one of my great hobby treasures is I've got a first edition Space Hulk, which I've had since I was, I don't know, 15, when the game came out, which must have been a present. I can't remember how I acquired it. I assume my parents gave it to me. But it is one of the very few things that I've still got from that era of gaming in my life, partly because I immigrated, so you tend to leave a lot of stuff behind when you do that because you got to travel pretty light. But that was one thing that I was not going to leave behind. Um, so a few years ago, because this game's always been one of my favorites, I thought, you know what, I'm going to get the 2 expansions for it. So they did 2 expansions, Deathwing and Gene Stealer. Both of these are incredibly expensive, especially Gene Stealer. I mean, we're talking hundreds and hundreds of pounds. Um, and so I started looking on eBay, and I'm like, no, I can't justify that. That's just even even if I theoretically have the money, that's just not a good thing to do. But eventually, I looked at it enough, and I found kind of at similar times 2 lots of Space Hulk stuff. They were just kind of messy lots, and I realized if I put these 2 together, I'd actually have everything. I was actually wrong. I was out by one counter, but so I bought these 2 lots, and I think probably together they cost me close on £300. Um, but that's still far cheaper than it would have been to actually buy the 2 sets, kind of as complete sets. And I even had enough pieces left over that I was able to cobble together a kind of set of the core game for a friend of mine. So I got even a bonus out of it. Um, so that was a lot of fun as a collector. The kind of ironic second part of the story is I don't think they actually improved the game at all. Like they're interesting, but they actually sort of undermine, to me, the beautiful simplicity of the original game. Um, so I haven't Deathwing. If you're a first edition Space Hulk collector out there, I would suggest go ahead and get Deathwing. It does have a few bits that you very well might want to add to your game. Ignore Gene Stealer; it's horrendously expensive and will not make your game better. But yeah, it was, like I said, it was fun as a collector, and I'm glad that I've done it. Um, but it also reminded me that, like, generally these giant purchases probably aren't really worth the money at the end of the day. Um, so yeah, that's my big one. So, but somehow I've resisted buying the 28 mil Titan.
Yeah.
I was talking to a friend of mine the other day about how, like, God, I used to love getting the Forge World catalog and looking through it, but I never bought anything from it. I could never justify it in my own mind. So.
Yeah, just dressing up as a Titan to play at 28
Exactly.
mil, stand on the
Oh,
table. It's been brilliant to chat, Joe.
yeah, it's been fun.
Good to catch up after a couple of years. What are you working on right now? Anything you could tell us about?
So I've just finished off a new Frostgrave supplement called the Chthonian Sea, which is deep, deep, deep under the frozen city. It's kind of like, when Gandalf falls down with the Balrog and ends up splashing in the lake. Well, this is that lake under Frostgrave, except it's much bigger and lots of things are going on down there. And the idea is that the Wizards of Frostgrave at one time knew it existed, but I guess a bit like Durin's Bane, found something down there they didn't like and shut it off, so that they tried to close all the pathways to it. But of course, the wizards like myself aren't good at listening to rules, and not everybody shut their pathways. So there's still a few ways to get there, and players being what they are going to want to go there because there's lots of weird treasure down there, and who cares how dangerous it is. But it's given me a chance to play around with a couple of ideas, kind of like what would live in such a place, what kind of monsters would you find there, how I can bring water into Frostgrave that isn't frozen, and how I can play with light, because it's kind of been a challenge to figure out a way to make light fun in a miniatures game. An acquaintance of mine, Chris Pramis, who's a pretty well-known game designer, mostly in role-playing, but he's done some miniature work, once said that, like, no miniature game has ever been improved by adding light as a rule. Light sources and things like that. And I generally tend to agree, but I think I've found a little rule that gives you the flavor of that without actually having to worry about generally who's carrying the lantern and how far they are from the lantern and stuff like that. So that's been a lot of fun. And I'm currently working on the first supplement for Warriors of Athena, called Voyages, which is about, believe it or not, voyaging. So a lot of boats and a lot of exploration, and it unfortunately keeps growing on me. It keeps getting longer as I find more and more fun stuff to put in there, and I should probably just call it done, but I can't seem to quite do that yet. So in some ways it's dragging on, and in other ways I'm having too much fun. So
You
that'll
mentioned
be
your
out.
Patreon a couple of times as
Yeah.
well. That'll be a place that listeners could pick up wee odds and ends from you, presumably.
Yeah, in fact, so a couple of things that are going to be in Voyages are things I originally put up on my Patreon because I just thought, hey, this would make the game more fun. And now I'm like, in fact, I think it makes it so much more fun. I should probably make that kind of official and stick it in there. But yeah, I'm always throwing bits and pieces on the Patreon, and it's, if you are interested in kind of my philosophies on gaming and kind of where that comes from and my favorite games, I do a lot of talk about that as well. So it's tends to be half either kind of new material for my game, or I'll post up really obscure stuff that maybe appeared in a magazine 8 years ago or stuff like that. And then the other half tends to be kind of like, this is how I got there and this is what I think about miniatures.
Massive thanks to Joe there for taking the time to have a chat. I can't believe it was February 2024 when we last spoke, but it's always a pleasure to catch up with him to find out what he's up to, and it's exciting to hear about these latest games as well. I did mention during the recording that Joe has also been on Paint All the Minis very recently, Dan's Paint All the Minis podcast, which I always have a laugh and a joke about, but it is genuinely a really good show. I know that many of you already listen to Paint All the Minis, but if for some reason you don't, or if you're new and you've not heard of that show, then I would recommend going and checking out Dan's episode with Joe as well. I knew we were kind of both recording with him around about the same time, and we were all wary of just replicating the same conversation. So it's definitely not. I've listened to Dan's chat, and they spent a bit more time getting into the two games that we talked about, Warriors of Athena and Hairfoot Jousting. So I think you could learn a bit more about those games if you listen to Dan's episode with Joe as well. I think they complement each other pretty well. And with that, I'm going to give Dan no more compliments, because his wee round head will be getting big if I keep going. So yeah, like I say, really good to catch up with Joe again. Elsewhere, I don't know whether to get into my hobby or lack of hobby updates now. I guess I'm going to leave it for next week, because we do have our hobby accountability and updates, and I can't talk because I'm pulling up the calendar now. I should have been more prepared here, sorry. This is a very Dan outro, isn't it? The post ramble, very spontaneous. So I'm just looking at the calendar. So time of recording, Tuesday the 23rd of June. So this is going to drop. You'll at least be listening to this on the 25th. This is riveting stuff, this, isn't it? Sorry. So yeah, I'm going to need your clip if you want to submit a clip, a hobby update clip for the question of the month episode for June going into July. I would need that in by midnight on Wednesday the 1st. That's me giving you an extra day there. So bedroombattlefields.com/voicemail. Go over there and you'll see the wee recorder. You could record directly into the software there, bedroombattlefields.com/voicemail. Or there's an email address where you can obviously email me your clip instead if you'd prefer to do it that way. It's all the same to me. But bedroombattlefields.com/voicemail. Please get over there before the 1st of July 2026. And I look forward as ever to all the clips that we might expect and finding out how everyone's month has gone. But yeah, that aside, there's actually more content from Joe. We recorded another 10 or 15 minutes for Patreon, as I've mentioned the last couple of episodes. I'm doing a wee bit more on Patreon now, actually offering incentives to sign up on there. So for as little as $5 a month, you could get these bonus episodes. So patreon.com/bedroombattlefields.com is where you can find that, and we've already got bonus episodes. Like I say, Joe's got one on there now, John from last week, and David from the week before. So each time I record with someone, we're going to spend 10 or 15 minutes extra creating Patreon exclusive content, and then the plan is that I'm going to do a couple of wee solo episodes in there as well. So yeah, patreon.com/bedroombattlefields, and that is really helping me out right now. Like I mentioned a few weeks ago, got made redundant, and I'm just trying to regroup and basically find someone to give me money to do something. So in the meantime, it makes sense for me at least to create a wee bit extra value. I'm never going to get the begging bowl out and ask you to sustain me, but if I could offer you something extra and you like the show and you're prepared to pay a wee bit extra to get that extra content, then it does really help me out. So thank you everyone who's supported so far on Patreon. So that really is it for this episode of the Tabletop Miniature Hobby Podcast. I guess the next one is going to be the aforementioned question of the month, so look forward to that as always. Thanks for listening, and we'll chat again on the next one.